People inside the US and out alike are always saying the US is the richest country in the world. A few of them do it to brag, but nowadays I usually hear it preceding questions like, so why can't we or they afford so and so? If you're asking that question, the reason you're confused is the statement, the richest country, means nothing. Language is a social institution, and like all social institutions, we don't always question it. There are countless phrases and statements that are misleading or simply wrong, but we say them every day. We call whole countries free or democracies just because they have elections. Well, what are freedom and democracy exactly? That never comes up. We talk about how bad crime is when we ourselves commit crimes every day. We talk about what institutions are supposed to do, even if they've never actually done it. Sometimes it's good to stop and consider if our language is accurate or if we're just reinforcing the status quo. Part of the problem with saying the richest country is it keeps us thinking in terms of countries. If you want to understand the world, or for that matter also envision a better future, you need to think beyond countries. No countries are rich and poor. Every country has rich people in it. People are rich, but they're individuals, not countries. And if they're not giving away all their money, their compatriots are no richer for it. In fact, it's quite common that the majority stays in poverty because others are rich. Where do they get their money from? You might want to check out this video for an answer to that. But in brief, there's a good chance they got it by taking the full value of the labor of the people around them and keeping it for themselves. People receiving basic wages don't get rich. They're just workers, forced to keep going back to work so lines on graphs can rise indefinitely. That's why it shouldn't encourage us to know the rich are getting richer. But it can help explain why the rest of us aren't. Why, in fact, the poor are getting poorer, and by roughly the same amount as the rich are getting richer. Moreover, a lot of the wealth floating around places like the US and the UK was created in other countries. Corporations extract huge amounts of value from poor workers abroad, millions of whom are slaves or live in quasi-slavery conditions. Sometimes when people say, this is the richest country in the world, they're saying everyone in that country should have more. And while they certainly should, under a global capitalist system, giving more to everyone in one country would inevitably mean redistributing wealth looted from workers abroad. The whole system is built on theft that way. I'm all for redistributing wealth, and since the political system has proven itself unwilling to do so, I'm okay with redistribution by any means necessary. But not if that wealth is being brought into the country on the backs of poor people overseas who have no choice. Again, if we think beyond countries, we discover worker solidarity, which has no borders. The only thing I can find the phrase richest country could mean is that the US has the highest GDP of any country in the world. If you know what GDP is, you know that means nothing. It just means the US makes more stuff than anywhere else. What does that have to do with you? It doesn't make you rich. It makes some people rich, but not most. You could say the US has a high GDP per capita, but again, that's meaningless because you're not the average person. Besides, the US doesn't have the highest GDP per capita. Depending who you ask, that title goes to Qatar. Like the US, Qatar's wealth is built on poor workers, In this case, migrant workers earning low pay, facing abuse, and dying in the thousands. Qatar has the highest GDP per capita because the figures don't include the people who do all the work and suffer all the risks. Going back to the US, any averages you look at would be skewed anyway by the fact that a few thousand people have way, way, way more wealth than average. These figures have nothing to do with the cost of living or the rate of inflation. They say nothing about how many poor people there are or how poor they are. They don't include the fact that you can go bankrupt for buying insulin or going to the hospital. I wonder why more relevant figures aren't published as widely. By the way, how's your retirement looking? Safe? Or impossible? If the country is rich, maybe you just aren't included in what defines the country. Either way, there's no reason you should be loyal to it. If the rich people who make up this richest country don't consider you worthy of their money so you can survive, why would you want to be lumped in with them? Countries are largely a distraction, a way of confusing issues and making people believe they should be loyal to people and institutions who only use them to make themselves richer. Your interests are different from theirs, and yet they're the same interests as workers in other countries. We will never be free as long as the nation-state exists, and if we keep uncritically repeating the phrases handed down to us from our rulers.